The Detroit Lions made a massive free agent signing this offseason. And if I'm looking at this correctly, I believe this is the largest contract the Lions have given to an out-of-house option under the Brad Holmes regime. And that's fascinating. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to be diving into Lions' new cornerback, DJ Reed, who signed a 3-year, $48 million deal this offseason. $32 million of that guaranteed, which essentially 2 years of that is guaranteed for the Lions. And we know that's replacing Carlton Davis, who left this offseason, signed a 3-year, little bit higher number deal with the New England Patriots. But DJ Reed is stepping in, and I believe that is the highest number the Lions have given out from. Number one, the Lions don't give out a lot of 3-year deals to out-of-house options, so that's already a little rare. And then also $16 million per season. Now, some of that's natural because the salary cap continues to rise, but also because the Lions may feel like they got a really good player here in DJ Reed and be really confident about his versatility defensively. And I don't just say that positionally because from like a slot perspective, while I do think his skill set can translate there, and we'll talk about that, that's not really been his game in the NFL. The Lions have brought in some undersized corners, but typically, while we feel comfortable with them playing on the outside because the Lions do, DJ Reed has lived out wide. The last time he really had significant snaps in the slot, you'd have to go back to 2020 where he played 99 snaps in the slot. Outside of that, he really doesn't. He lives out wide. Even this past season, he was listed with 14 snaps in the slot. 2 of those were Hail Marys. They weren't really slot snaps. It was because he was moved in by motion. That's it. He lives on the outside. Now, from a statistical perspective for DJ Reed, he's in a really good spot here, though he doesn't have a ton of interceptions, which you may like to see that number be a little bit higher. Some of that is play style as well. Some of that's just ball skills. But with that being said, he did have 7 pass breakups this past year, which was 22nd in the NFL. And if you look at the advanced statistics, well, you'll see the PFF grades and say, hey, he was better in man coverage by grade than any of the Lions cornerbacks this past season, though he did a much smaller sample size, about a third of the snaps of guys like Terrion Arnold, who played man coverage this past season. He was really good when he was there. And also in zone coverage, he's consistently been very good in that spot as well. As this past season in zone coverage, he only allowed a 60% completion percentage. Now, he allowed a 62% completion percentage in man, but the year before that was sub 50%. So he fits right in with the Lions cornerbacks as well. But in zone, he's fantastic as well. And that versatility is what stood out to me when watching DJ Reed. It wasn't about the inside-outside flexion because he's 5'9", 190 pounds, and he looks undersized when he plays out wide, but it's actually the ability to play in any kind of coverage scheme that I want to throw him into. And that's even the techniques within those coverage schemes, press man, off-man coverage, zone coverage, but then also the different styles that he can play within those coverages and be incredibly comfortable is what stood out to me. I think about Carlton Davis, and he was so long, and he was really good in man coverage spots. And then when he came to the Lions, like, that's going to crank up, and it did. But also in zone coverage, he was outstanding for the Lions this past season, and that was huge. You think about the Houston Texans games where he was taking the football away. So his versatility is what really shined this past year with Carlton Davis, and I think we could get a very similar idea here with DJ Reed, just in a much different mold. Now, he does have uniquely long arms at 31.5 inches and 10-inch hands for a guy that's 5'9" is incredibly unique. And he also tested out pretty well coming out of the draft. The 28-year-old corner now ran a 6.82 3-cone drill, had a 4.51 40, which puts him in the same range as a guy like Terrion Arnold, as well as a 36.5-inch vertical. You've probably all seen the analytics by now, but if you haven't, his tight window throw rate forced is always one of the best in the league. In this past season, he was 4th in the NFL in that tight window rate. And even if you go back through week 6, he was 1st in the NFL, as that was at 52%. So he's been fantastic at just making and congesting passes, limiting airspace. That's essentially his game, no matter what coverage type that you put him in. And we know that's going to fit the Lions well, because you'll have some defensive penalties that come along with that, but he's going to make you earn everything as a pass catcher. And then as a run defender, he's a very effective run defender, though we'll get to that here in a second. For me, DJ Reed, the one thing that really pops consistently, I talked about the coverage versatility, and we'll get to that, but it's the movement skills. It is obviously the movement skills. I think he has great reactive athleticism, and that's where things jump off here when you think about the critical factors from a cornerback position. Is this is an area that you absolutely love DJ Reed's ability, from the body control, the ability to stop start as a cornerback. Being on the shorter side, typically you look for that. Guys that stop start, it's a little bit easier to change direction. Being 5'9", you can kind of expect that. There's short area quickness as well. That's a little bit anticipated, but you'll see this like at the top of the route, the way that he can gather his feet. It shows up in recovery a ton. It's incredibly impressive. The ability to deal with contact as well with some of that short area quickness that he has. He also has some real looseness to his game. He's got some explosive, dynamic hip transitions, whether that's opening up to deal with things things vertically, whether that's kind of flipping out of a half turn or really flipping into a half turn coverage. The looseness in his hips is incredibly notable. Top of the route at the line of scrimmage, especially when you're working further downfield in terms of some of that reactive athleticism that he has. Now, halves have some issues where he'll get a little bit high, and that can lead to some problems, whether that's a plant drive, whether it's just losing balance at the top of the route. He can play a little bit tall. You'll also see this in his off-band back pedal, which we'll talk about here in a second, but he has excellent tracing footwork. Well, Meek Robertson was pretty darn good in this category as well. So was Carlton Davis. Guys that can trace routes from behind, they can play and trail naturally, and that's something that he does incredibly well, whether that's kind of on purpose in some of the two-man coverages. Maybe you're playing an outside leverage and you're trying to force things back inside, or maybe you just get caught in trail positions and you're trying to recover. That ability to trace routes from underneath, again, shorter cornerbacks typically do this better, but he does it at an incredibly high level when he has to trace routes. To see this on broken plays, how impactful he can be. Now, that's where you can get a little bit handsy. Maybe he'll get some flags, but outside of that, the movement skills when he gets into broken plays is outstanding. He plays with that kind of urgency. When you watch DJ Reed, you're going to see a little bit less fluidity, more kind of the urgency, more a little bit clunky when you watch him, bursty, and he's very physical as a cornerback. You get more of that style. Swivel ability when he's working more of those pedal situations, or he's trying to stay on top of routes, which is typically his game, as he wants to connect, he wants to control routes, and that's where you see some of those movement skills show up as well. You also see the instinctual feel to his game. We'll talk about this more with the eye balance, but that ability to really beat receivers to their break, the ability to sync up his footwork incredibly well, notice change of pace, notice little subtleties from route running, and he also ties it along with also being patient. We'll see this as a press corner as well, but you'll see examples where he'll beat his receiver to the break like we saw against Minnesota on an out route to kind of come to balance, recover off double moves where he puts himself in a bad spot. You'll see that over aggression. You're like, oh, that's going to put him in a bad spot. And then he recovers out of it incredibly quickly and he gets himself back into the play, finds some contact. So for me overall, his ability in terms of reactive athleticism is great. I do question a little bit of some of the ankle bend at the top of the routes. There can be a subtle kind of like hitch or delay to it where he's coming to a gather where he kind of drops his weight rather than actually bending and kind of leaning through routes. And again, that's more of his play style. He's a little bit more clunky as a mover, but he's incredibly twitchy and he's incredibly bursty as a cornerback rather than being more so on just the fluid side of things, which is kind of what I think about a little bit more with Carlton Davis. It's a touch of a different style here. I think it's just the way that he moves, but it works for him. This was up there where I had a guy like Terrion Arnold. He's in that kind of category as well coming out of the draft. In terms of play speed, I think this could be higher. I think he has good play speed from this position as well. The 40 time's not elite, but it's also not in a bad spot either. For me, the big thing here is that he'll lose some discipline just in terms of the way that he moves. He tends to kind of go off script a little bit. That can put him in some tough positions specifically, and this is in all different coverage alignments. He can go a little bit off script, get a little bit undisciplined, but his recovery acceleration is urgent. I love the angles that he plays with when he's trying to get back into plays. The way that he undercuts routes is fantastic. He has a real feel for route development, and it's very sudden, it's very urgent, it's immediate in terms of trying to recover into plays. That half-turn stop-start movement is incredibly fluid. One of the biggest issues that he has, and again, back to off-man coverage, that he can really be pressed when working off-man coverage spots, where if he's not proactive enough or he doesn't get moving quick enough and he allows guys to attack him, he can get caught on his heels, and again, that will slow some of the movement speed, especially at the top of the route. But that effort that he showcases, the discipline that he plays with when he falls into positions where he has to recover, as well as the acceleration, the ability to kind of deal with drags underneath and cut those things off, it makes me believe that, oh yeah, you can kick him in the slot and there's going to be success, but also on vertical routes, dealing with fades over top, the way that he kind of cuts off routes, takes control of those routes, and then he gets himself in a spot where it's hard to throw the football. We saw this against Minnesota over and over for the Jets. He had such a game against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I mean, he was elite. Ability to cut off routes vertically on some of those fade stems is fantastic as well. And just getting done watching a guy like Dominic Lovett where that can happen to him, that's where I think of a DJ Reed thriving. So I'd love to see that matchup a few times and just see how that kind of shakes out. That he also carries here is he has very short strides, which can put him in a spot in terms of like lengthy situations. You think about putting him in some field coverage assignments where being forced to cover more ground, maybe he's playing a little bit off coverage. That's where you'll question a little bit some of the depth that he actually covers when he's working downhill. Those short strides can get him in a spot where he just can't always actually get to the football as things kind of expand and things kind of elongate. And tend to have some hit and miss patience when he's working off coverage or the way that he enters into the stem of routes. To me, when he's patient to find connection and he's not reaching and instead he's just allowing himself to play over top before trying to look for his search for connection, that's when you see an outstanding play speed because he's not putting himself into trouble and he has that ability to kind of find a latch eventually on the play. And eventually when he could do that by being patient, he's really tough to deal with when he kind of just settles back in on top of routes. To me, he has plus speed when he is working in his pedal. He just, again, doesn't cover a ton of depth. Problem is there sometimes he's also not out incredibly proactive to get to those spots. So the closing length, you'll see this especially underneath, can leave a little bit of room, showing some ability to read through concepts. It can allow him to kind of work through not getting picked off of routes, and specifically his ability to show some of that awareness when working through traffic. Now, that doesn't show up as much when he's in press coverage assignments or when he's in much more condensed splits, and we'll show that. And that could be an issue a little bit more when you think about moving in the slot, but he's a little bit wider. You'll see some of that awareness to kind of work through traffic, work through route combinations specifically, and be able to read through those.
Like, for example, here when DJ reads the quarterback, you're going to see him stay on the outside. He doesn't get aggressive to get over the top. He stays on the outside with the quarterback, reading that he's bootlegging.
Speed when he's trying to protect his blind spot. Maybe that's vertically. He's in a half turn spot. Someone gets in his blind spot. He's got to flip and work vertically. He maintains speed. As anything, he builds speed through that spot, which is incredibly impressive as well, working through transition. His transition ability is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And especially as long as his footwork is underneath him, or he has a pad level that's not incredibly upright and he's getting knocked off the top of the route, because it's more so if that is the issue. From a movement perspective, his ability to transition is great. So for me, he has good play speed. You can maybe look at this being a little bit higher as well. I think it's good at this point. And in terms of making plays on the ball, this is where I have him a little bit closer to average. I think he's slightly above average here. There's elements of this that I like. I like the way that he reads the wide receiver's eyes so he can find the football. I don't like how he'll lose focus. I don't like how you can attack him with his eyes in the backfield. I mean, even think about it. The Texans tried to throw a quarterback pass to them, or a receiver pass to the quarterback. They tried to do that against him because maybe they knew that he would lose a little bit of focus peeking into the backfield. So it's things like that. It's when he does try to track the football, he may lose connection with the receiver. It's also some of the limitations. From a length perspective, though, his arm length isn't terrible, but also just the way that he kind of gives ground at the catch point, and his ability to track, I don't think is naturally outstanding either. Like, tracking the ball downfield doesn't seem to be his best skill set either. Game of DJ Reed is to cause congestion, and even though he can get a little bit physical, and I think the big thing he'll have to watch for is when he gets his hand wrapped around an offensive player's back, he does play with really good timing at the catch point to knock passes away, so he doesn't tend to arrive incredibly early when working downhill. When he does find some contact vertically, and you'll see some of the kind of the hand fighting that happens downfield, a lot of times I don't feel like he actually initiates it when working some of those vertical routes. Instead, he's a lot of times just kind of fighting back. What he does well is he works to get into the body rather than just going for an initial grab. And I think what he does well is he really pries away like one arm. So vertically, while he may be in a spot where he can get knocked off at the catch point, and that does tend to be a problem, especially at the top of the route, he'll kind of get it shoved off, especially if he's not balanced. He does have a stout frame on press situations where you won't see him knocked off very often. But further down the field, hips can get open or he can get a little bit upright. That's where you'll see him get pushed off the top of the route, and that's why it shows up more often in those spots. Initiates contact for control. He'll do this when he gets on top of routes, which leads to a ton of success within his game. That way he can really slow timing. He can make it so quarterbacks don't want to throw the football that direction, and really just position himself well. And when he does well, so kind of take away a single arm when working some of those vertical spots, or if he's in a trail position, he'll kind of work through a single arm to get through your body, where it's hard for receivers to make a grab. I think about basketball players defensively, where they'll kind of get one arm inside, so you're kind of limited to working one hand. And it's a subtle technique, but it's very effective. And I think DJ Reed has that little ability. The fact that he's the initiator of contact, I feel like it finds a lot of success. And the fact that for him, he has that ability to just congest things, make things really uncomfortable for a receiver. He just lacks some of that length. I don't think he's outstanding at tracking the football generally down the field. So ultimately for me, DJ Reed to me is slightly above average right now in terms of ball skills. I don't think he's elite once the ball's in the air to making a play on the football. Really good eye balance, which gets him in a spot to plant and drive. And he's got a very quick trigger to drive on the football. So for me, DJ Reed does a lot of good things in just terms of he's going to make it difficult to come down with the ball as a receiver, and he's going to be in your hip all game long. And as a quarterback, at best, I think what he does is he kind of minimizes quarterbacks even wanting to throw the ball. I remember a huge highlight from Meek Robertson for me when we signed him was against us when he was a Raider, where he had that quick trigger to curl route underneath, go off the side not to throw it, came back late, threw a pick on the opposite side of the field. Well, he won't get a stat for that. That's the kind of thing that DJ Reed brings and he offers, is that feel where it's like, I don't know if I really want to test throwing the ball in that direction. And that's what DJ Reed brings to the field, which doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but it shows up when the quarterback has to hold the ball longer.
Couple things here at the top of the screen. Notice the leverage that he plays with in half turn. You see how he's leveraged forward so that he can dive on the football, and he deals with the double move really well. But notice how he finds contact before looking back for the ball, and he does a good job of reading through the receiver's eyes to find that they're looking for the ball. The problem is he loses connection with the receiver when he's tracking the football, and he doesn't seem to track the ball that well in the air. He seems to be pretty late to try to actually find it. So now that he's no longer connected, he gives up receptions downfield.
Now, in terms of the types of coverages that he plays, from press coverage, off coverage, zone coverage, let's start with his ability to press first, because I think he's a very good press corner. Now, he has a lot of the skill set to be effective here. Number one, he's a pretty powerful corner. He's a little bit stocky. He's not overly stocky, but he's a little bit stocky at the point of attack. And you'll see it when he's balanced. He's got some force to his game. And again, he likes to initiate contact, so he can be pretty disruptive off the line of scrimmage. But he also ties together with a real patience to his game. And this, to me, allows him to work multiple releases. He has a skill set to deal with more elongated releases, which can be a problem, I think, especially for younger corners. As the release gets drawn out, to being able to stay square, they'll get themselves flipped. They'll start to declare their hips. They get put in bad spots. You'll see this on elongated releases that lead to just an inside slant, and they'll get wide open wins. DJ Reed's not going to give that up as often. He does a nice job of fighting himself to stay square. The release type, well, he doesn't cover that much ground laterally, which can get him in some problems where if it's a very wide release, or specifically if it's like a stack situation where he starts to race over top rather than just trusting moving laterally, that'll get him to a spot where he's not square anymore. But dealing with like elongated releases, he has the foot quickness to step on top of those. Then he also has the patience to be very reactive to everything that he gets off the line of scrimmage. But also on the flip side, maybe it's a hesitation, or maybe it's just like a false release like we saw from Justin Jefferson, where he's not actually going anywhere off the line. You'll see DJ Reed be patient and not move at all. And he has that feel where he can deal with a lot of different and nuanced releases where younger players would kind of get thrown off in those spots, but he does a great job staying in front. He has that mirror pedal ability to kind of stay square off the line. Again, a strong base when he's balanced at the line of scrimmage. He's got the fast feet to deal with the speed release. He transitions incredibly well, so he can get out and run, and he can deal with speed releases, guys that are just trying to take off. He can get on top of those routes a lot of times, and he has some of that lateral quickness to deal with moving right or left. But the big problem there is, again, he just doesn't cover a ton of depth in those spots, so he can get strung out a little bit in those plays. The big issue that I have is that he can be just a little bit over-exaggerated to dealing with press release types. Sidestep too far. He doesn't get both feet into the sidestep, so he becomes a little bit wide, and that forces him to make extra footwork to recover if it breaks back inside. That's the big thing. It's just a little bit of an over-exaggeration at times working off the line of scrimmage, and he'll also use some independent footwork, which is okay, but at times it can get him in some bad spots.
Maybe the most consistent element of his ability to press is that punch timing. The stab timing is outstanding. But again, the over-exaggeration, a lot of different areas does pop. Top of the route, you see it here. Gets a little bit over-aggressive, kind of creating depth. You'll notice that as we talk a little bit further.
Or mainly, he just is forced to use extra footwork to recover because he's not keeping his feet on a string, so we can get a little bit wider than you typically would like to see him play.
He tends to be very accurate and proactive with his first step. Where it gets him into trouble is he's over-exaggerates, shorten releases, shorten footwork. And then you get that pounding footwork when he's looking for contact and he gets to the top of the route and he's still searching for contact. That's when you get some of that pounding footwork where he's not as light, and it can make it difficult for him to deal with these multi-complex breaks underneath.
Reactive to everything. His footwork can be a little bit laggy, and this is more so getting into the stem of the route when he's looking for contact. If he doesn't get on top of the route, he's kind of playing from behind. Him searching for contact, which he tends to do, he's got that aggressive nature. That's where he can get into trouble because his feet will kind of lag behind, trying to find a good entry point, and that's what'll get into trail spots. That's also when you could get grabbing from behind. So that's the big thing for me, is when he stays patient, he's incredible in those spots. I think he's a very good press corner. He's got really everything you would want here. He's got an effective stabs that are very good with timing when he tries to jam guys at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't lunge through his stabs either, and he's got better length than you would expect for a guy at that spot. So for me, I think he's a very good press corner. As an off-coverage corner, again, I like a lot of things here. I think he's good in this category as well. Uses his hands. He's not as grabby, kind of finds the hip consistently. Naturally, his pad level gets him there, but he finds the hip consistently when working at the top of the route. The big thing is just getting upright, right? Getting upright at the top of the route leads to some problems, like is that he is very able to adapt to the pace of the route. He has a really good sense of reading that receiver body language when it speeds up, slows down, to adapt his footwork to it. He's got a quick trigger, but the eye balance as well that ties to this, where, he'll break routes before receivers do. He has an anticipation to him where he can see it immediately. If it's a one-step drop out of the shotgun, he'll find that immediately, get back to the receiver, and he'll expect to jump on the football. Now, again, double moves could be a problem because of that, but he has some recovery, which allows him to a lot of times get back into the play. But he's going to anticipate jumping a route. Over-aggressive. I think he gets over-aggressive squeezing the stem of routes, as I said, when getting in trail. But in this case, when he's trying to work back on top of routes that maybe break inside, he may try to step on top of those routes, and he'll get him into a spot where he has an outside leverage with inside help, but he'll step completely on top of the route trying to cut it off, which is effective. But the problem that can lead to there is if it breaks back outside, say like a corner route or a post corner, where he can get too far on top. And now, even though he's pretty loose in his transitions, he's in a tough spot to actually open himself back up up and deal with some of the outside breakers, because that's where he can lose a little bit of his step. That's where you'll see his footwork kind of become unbalanced a little bit. It'll get tangled on him. So for me, just being a little bit aggressive. You'll also see that when he does get pressed, kind of working square in some of those pedal situations when he's more that base alignment where he's not as reactive to get backwards, that's where you'll see some of the gathers start to slow up a little bit for the plant and drive. Gives you a little extra footwork. His weight tends to shift up. That's where you'll see just a little bit extra footwork that's necessary here. Yeah, we talked about kind of the bend through routes. Those in breakers, he can drop his weight and deal with those and get flat. Problem is there's just a little bit of like a hitch. There's a little bit of a delay within that transition. It's not as smooth as just kind of bending and running through the route. It's a little bit more segmented at the top of the route. We have the ability to drop his weight, change pace incredibly well when he's working in off coverage. He has that fast feet to find balance. When guys try to knock him off, he can find some recovery because he's got the fast feet to get back the pacing to it. And we've seen this against bigger receivers, smaller receivers. The pace that he plays with is fantastic, whether it's on the field or on the boundary. And that moves you to zone coverage. And this is the area that surprised me the most, is that I think he's very good in zone coverage. This could be where you like him the most out of anything. And obviously he played a solid amount here with the Jet, played a variety of different zone coverages, and he was effective at all of them. I loved watching him play zone coverage because, again, back to the half coverage position, when he can fade over routes that are vertically working his stem, kind of keep guys in front of him, keep guys on that inside shoulder. That way guys aren't just settling into his blind spot left and right. Technically, he gets some issues if they do get into his blind spots, but he does kind of fade over top of those routes really well. I would like to see maybe at times a little bit better leverage forward when he's working in those spots, but he always fades over routes, kind of cuts things off as they're working vertically. So that could be like a quarter spot or a cover 3. Does a really good job there. He has the vision to work in under coverages. So like a cover 2 where he works 2-to-1 constantly, where he reads that number 2 receiver, cuts off things on the inside, gets a really good break on the ball. The eye balance starts to pop here a lot more in zone when he can get his eyes back to the quarterback. He's got a very balanced lateral movement to his game on top of the stem, and this could be under coverage, this could be over top as well. Balance is what shines here. He's aggressive in his plant and drive to see it and go. I like how in cover 3 he cuts off routes, but he also shows a vision in cover 3 to recognize route combinations, recognize like, okay, I'm going to pass it off and drop this back underneath. The biggest problem that he has there is, as good as the vision is, and he's a fantastic communicator, he reads it early, inside break, let me drop out, let me give help. You're not going to get guys that are going to work behind him because you had a crosser underneath and you had a guy running a deep post behind him where it's like he was stuck with that, so he didn't drop. He's going to drop immediately and he's going to communicate and let everybody know. The problem is he gets himself sometimes overly aggressive into a position where he can't actually drop off and give support. And you'll see this in like cover 4 where he's playing on top of a route and he wants to drop down and help underneath, but he's late to it because he's so far on top of the route that he actually can't give a lot of support there. But protects his leverage incredibly well in zone coverage as well. Right off the line, if it's cover 2, let me squeeze outside, force it back inside. He really does a nice job of protecting leverage, finding your hip, but staying leveraged in those spots, finding contact before looking back for the football, right? That way he has a sense of where the receiver is. Back to the ball skills issue, that's something I do have an issue with as well, is that he'll find contact and find the ball, but he doesn't connect those really well. He doesn't maintain contact while finding the ball. A lot of times it's one or the other unless he's purely on top of the route. But if he's in like your hip, he'll find your hip and then find the ball, but he doesn't do both at the same time. That allows receivers late to kind of break away and find space and maybe get big plays over top. And we saw that this past season. But I like a lot of aspects about his ability in zone coverage, from the vision that he plays with, that he connects with his footwork, the communication that he plays with. Transitions are easy, right? To go from pedal to half turn, to break back downhill, right? To flip himself back up. Like, it's very smooth. He could just kind of pull himself out of positions. And we saw this one time last year working the slot where he kind of overlapped coverage very aggressively, got pulled out of a mesh point. That's where he can do some things where he could just be overlapping too aggressively, but that's the nature that you like because it makes so many big plays. But he will just be a little bit aggressive overlapping coverage, right? Receiver comes into his zone, he's going to play that and try to take it away, and it's great, but it can leave openings. It can leave openings through route combinations. Though he reads them well, can't see the full field when he gets in those spots. He'll just pull himself out of the play to actually make a play if he has to drop off and step down, and that shows up in all different type of coverage varieties specifically. For me, ultimately, I think he's very good in zone. I trust him in zone, inside or outside, and I trust him in any zone coverage alignment that you want to put him in, and I think that's where his eye balance shines. So to me, DJ Reed, like, there's a shot this is the best corner we've had in years. Like, I think it's very on the table. Carlton was great for us this past year, so we're looking to kind of figure that out. But I think there's a real reason Lions paid him the money that he did. Year after year, he's consistent. He's the same player. He's healthy much more often. There's a big reason the Lions paid him what they did, and I think there is inside-outside flexibility because I think that he has the short area foot quickness, the burst to do it, the willingness to step down and run support. My issues with run support is he does have some missed tackles. He had 8 this past season. Typically, he's about that 11% range, which isn't terrible. He had 55 tackles. He will have some missed tackles where he, to me, becomes a little bit more of a reacher rather than actually playing through his full body as a tackler, right? He's trying to wrap, but he's just kind of grabbing more so than anything. But what you like is the way that he breaks down. He breaks down really well against the run. He can work laterally against the run, kind of fill in to run lanes. Again, the discipline's there to kind of set an edge, but there's also an activeness. There's an urgency to his game. This is on broken plays and coverage. It's also his run defense. Like, he wants to get across the field. He wants to stick his nose in. And there is just a very hot motor that doesn't stop. He doesn't have a lot of blitzing opportunities from what we've seen, but his motor runs incredibly hot as a run defender. Ultimately, like, he's a plus player in that spot. I think he'd be fine in the slot in that spot as well. He just isn't as agile working in traffic when he's in slot. When things get very condensed, he's trying to maneuver around traffic. He tends to kind of bump in all kinds of traffic. And again, he's a little bit less fluid, a little bit more choppy. And I think that's why he fits wide as an undersized corner, because he's a little bit more choppy as a corner in the way that he plays. But I think he could play in the slot. And hey, if your best three on the field was Rakestraw, Terrion, and DJ in the slot, that's your best three on the field. So be it, right? If they're going to leave Rakestraw wide, I think you could make that work, and that could be your best three. But he's going to be on the field in some way, because this is a hard player to take off the field. So with that being said, DJ Reed, this could be a massive move for the Lions. And I mean, he looks like, there's games where he looks like one of the handful of best cornerbacks in football, and then you just get some limitations in there. But he's one of the more well-rounded cornerbacks, I think, in the game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.